Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your host Sam Foote.
And Alan Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Office 365 focused IT security professionals. Each episode, we talk about a specific topic in this space. This week is episode 10 of season 2. We're going to have a chat around features in identity governance within Azure AD, part of Microsoft Entra family of identity products. This will include privileged identity management, access reviews, and access packages. Hey Ellen, how's it going?
Hey, I'm not doing too bad. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Not too bad. I'm very interested to hear around identity governance today because I believe this is probably an area that I am least familiar with, if that makes sense. I love to build in on platform and to help secure platform, but around identity governance is sort of an area that I've not avoided, but I just haven't got a lot of experience in. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to find out what functionality is in Azure AD. Have got a few. I've used a few parts of this before, but I think it's really good for people to understand, what functionality is there in Azure AD.
Yeah, that's cool. And we've hit our episode 10, so we've
Yeah.
bypassed our season 1.
Yeah, so we're actually better than we were before. So well done to Alan and I.
Yeah.
And thank you very much to the software and everything that we use to record these episodes. It's made it a lot slicker, a lot easier for us to do these things. So
Uh,
we've got no excuses not to do it now.
no. And of course, thank you, listeners, for listening
Yeah,
and making sure that we see your listens, so it means we create more content.
exactly. And if you're not bots listening to these episodes, then we see the analytics and we see you listening, right? So yeah, I do hope there's some real people out there. Cool. Right. Should we get started on identity governance, Alan?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Right. So, can you just give us a brief sort of high level overview about what Azure AD identity governance actually is?
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of in the name. It's to help govern your identity. I don't think there's any other way I can put that without repeating the type, the product. Uh, but yes, so it's to help with different parts of your identity and governing it. So some of it might be the lifecycle of a user's identity within Azure AD, um, or it could be reviewing, um, you know, keep continuously reviewing people's access to things like that, and of course, just in time access. Just enough time, access at just the right time. So the three areas that we're going to kind of cover is entitlement management, access reviews, and privileged identity management, which we've talked in multiple episodes about.
Cool. Great. So, should we just start off with entitlement management? Could you just give us a brief overview of what entitlement management aims to achieve?
Sure. So entitlement management is the piece that is looking at the user's life cycle. So it's not necessarily doing the joiner mover lever process or anything like that, but can help with um, giving users permission based on their role. It's kind of it helps towards it. So this is able to within entitlement management, you're able to create access packages. Now, access packages are, as they sound, packages that give you access to different things. So within Azure or Azure AD, I should say, this is access, permissions to a Microsoft Teams or SharePoint site or an Azure AD group, or it could be to applications that are integrated with Azure AD. So you can build a package with, say, the example might be that you've got a finance team, and they always have, the finance teams, Microsoft Teams, two made teams in there. Could be access to the finance apps. There may be two or three of them, as well as access potentially to maybe a mailbox or something like that. You can put those we'll have to confirm. I have to confirm about mailboxes, but with the other applications and groups and team sites, you can add them into a single package, and then you can assign them to those users, and that could be based on a group, which could be a dynamic group based on their their department, or it could be part of your onboarding process that when someone joins, they have to go and request that finance app or finance access group. So that's probably the other part to it, is that you can have these packages and the users can go and request access, request that package. So it might be when a new starter comes into the organization, they don't get any. Maybe they get like the default package for the organization that gives them the base applications, but then they then have to request the applications for their role. It might be part of the finance onboarding system that they have to do that. Um, Once that's done, then they get access, and within that access package, you can, as I said, you can do an approval process for people requesting. They can just receive it, but also you can specify the amount of time they have it for before they can request an extension. So you can say, well, this might be maybe there is a application, say, I don't know. Let's think about it. Adobe Photoshop, or Adobe Cloud Services, and they need it for 30 days. So someone can request that application or access application, have it for 30 days, and then it will just be removed. So then you're reducing your licensing because they're not subscribed, and things like that. So it's really helpful to be able to deploy, certain things to certain users based on that sort of information.
Okay, so what you're effectively saying is that we can bundle up different, let's call them resources. I don't know what you actually call them,
Yeah, that's
components
probably
inside of
right.
that resources inside of an access package, and then um, you're then putting a life cycle around that access package. You're saying, okay, it depends what the rules are, and there's a lot of configuration there, isn't there? Of
Yeah.
how you can customize this, but you can say, people need to request access to it. There could be a time bound access, to it, so it's not permanently assigned to them, and the approval process of who guards access to those resources, and put some sort of um, a hierarchy of responsibility and role in place for those.
Yeah, and you can also guests, B2B users, guest users can also request access packages as well. So you may have that, you bring someone, someone gets invited to the organization, and then they can choose what services they need from that perspective as well. And the access packages don't all have to be configured by admins. You can delegate it down. So you may have um, you can build catalogs, and then users can own catalogs. So you might have like the head of marketing might manage their own catalog to give permissions to different SharePoint sites they own, so they can manage that piece. And same thing with other departments potentially.
Okay, yeah, that seems really powerful, and I suppose in larger organizations there must be lots of permissions and resources that you want to give lots of different teams access to them. So I'm guessing it adds a lot of structure in around managing those sort of content, managing those.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess if without talking about PIM in Azure infrastructure, potentially you could have an access package for a service which gives you the right permissions you need for that service within Azure, because it could be based on group permissions in Azure. So if you need permission to look after the the web app, and it's in like different subscriptions, things like that, you could give permission to that one app, and it would give them the right permissions for X days
Right.
and things
Okay.
like that.
Yeah.
But
So
you'd want to do
yeah.
PIM, but again, we'll talk about that.
Okay. Yeah. So it is kind of like, in some respects, kind of like PIM, but for the enterprise, or the identity side, not the cloud. It's kind of similar to that, isn't it? Because you can put those approvals and life cycles in and around it. But I think PIM is more for just in time access anyway, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Same sort of concept though, right? Okay. Well, okay, that's cool. Um, okay, and you mentioned in the overview of identity governance, you talked about access reviews. What are they, and how do they work?
So access reviews are, um, trying to understand or to manage your attestation within Azure. So this is making sure that if you don't have a an access package that says you've got it for 30 days and you've got to reapply for it, that you can go to team sites or groups or applications, um, and basically do a review of that group. And this could be, this is checking whether a user still needs access to that application. And in effect, it's an admin or a owner of that product or team that has to do that review, to understand it. So this is really good for guest access. So you invite guests into the environment. Um, they work with the organization for 3 to 6 months, and then they don't work again, but the account's still there with the same permissions because there may not be a cleanup process. So with this, you can do a review of guests within the tenant, and it will come back saying, you can put some filters on it now. It's quite new. That's recently come out that you can put some filters saying I haven't seen activity for X days. So you can say, if I've seen a guest user with no activity for 30 days, then I want to review them, because it might be legitimate that we're not going to use them for 30 days or 2 months, but they're going to come back. We know they're going to come back. So yes, so once you've done that, once you've got your access review, the reviewers, which can be people you select, the owner of a group or service or application, or it could be the actual user or the guest user or the user itself to self-review, to do it like an amnesty. I don't need that access anymore.
Have
Whether
you ever
that
seen that
actually
happen?
happens,
Yeah,
oh
yeah, totally.
yeah, yes.
Sorry.
I guess people may not want to, like, for instance, us, you and I, that
Yeah. Are we just very
sometimes,
pessimistic? Does that actually happen in real life? Like, are we just, yeah, we're just these jaded, yeah. Sorry, yeah, but yeah,
it's
go
right.
on.
But yeah, so we do these reviews, and then in this review, when somebody gets it, they have X amount of time to do it, and you can schedule these. You don't have to do like, an admin doesn't have to go in and do it every month or whatever. You can specify, weekly, monthly, quarterly, 6 months, and annually, these reviews, and they just keep running. But when they get the review, they basically get a list, and Microsoft gives you, or the service gives you a recommendation, and this is based on activity. I mean, because they haven't been in this scenario, they haven't been active for 30 days, so the recommendation is to remove their access or remove them from the tenant. So, but in other reviews, it might be that, this user hasn't been active for 2 weeks, um, but they're still employed by the organization, but they're off on holiday or something, or they have left at that point. But yeah, so the person that is doing the review can then make the decision to keep access or remove access. Once that is saved or submitted, completed, that then goes back into the system, and depending on what you choose, it can automatically go and, execute your recommendations, or it can sit there and say, "This is your recommendations," right? And then there can be a button to say execute, so that you have to go in and enforce it, kind of thing. Um, with the guest access, what it does do is that there's a setting there. So instead of removing them from a group or a service, it will disable their accounts for 30 days. And if they don't reactivate by an admin re-enabling it after 30 days, it will then uninvite them from the tenant and remove them, so that then you've got a clean environment.
Wow. Okay. So yeah. So there's quite a lot of customization around that process, right? It's not just somebody internally might, well, you could set up so that somebody internally might be revoking access to, say, I assume, a guest that they might have invited. Could you use it for that? Like, or does it
Yeah,
cover guests and
yeah.
all of
So it
that
can
sort of
be
stuff?
based on the user's manager. So if the guest has
Okay.
been given, um, like they've used the field for manager as the sponsor for that user,
Okay.
then they can be requested to review that access, to
Right.
say,
Okay. Yeah.
do they
Yeah.
still need
Exactly.
access?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and if you're not quite sure, you can obviously do this thing where you wait for 30 days for them to confirm their access is still needed, and if not, it just they just get silently removed from the tenant at that point, right? So yeah, that seems really powerful, to be honest with you. Like that's yeah.
Yeah, it's just helping automate that tidy up,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
restricting permissions creep, as
Yeah.
we talked
Yeah.
about
Well, yeah. Well,
from the other,
it's
from last week.
yeah, it's interesting how we talk about like remediation and tidying up and how that's trying to help us automate that because Defender for Cloud is moving you into a direction to help you with that. Um, Entra Provisions Management is helping you with that, and then here we've got this on this side also trying to help you. That's a recurring theme really in the cloud world. Is it's not really the scale and flexibility is there, but it's also like how you're then going to manage that scale once you've got it in
Yes.
there, right? Once it actually happens, how do you clean up and sort things out in the future? Yeah, that's an interesting recurring thing.
Yeah, and you'd think that if you're quite large on, you've got quite a large environment on the Microsoft Teams side, loads of SharePoint sites with groups, assignment and team. You've got tons of teams, teams. Um, it gives you you don't have it doesn't have to be too complex that you have to create an access review for each one. You can say I want to review all of them, all the
Yeah,
groups, all the Microsoft 365 and Teams groups. So and then you specify, it's the managers of the people in there. Do they still need access, or the owner, sort of thing? So it's not. It can get complex if it's needed to, and I think we see this with everything, isn't it? It can be complex if needed,
yeah,
but doesn't have to be to start off with.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can sort of grow into it can grow around your complex requirements inside of your specific organization, right? And how because it's usually those edge cases that stumble products like this, isn't it? Right? I need to be able to do X, Y, and Z, and it needs to be flexible enough to support those scenarios, but not overly complex for when you don't need it. Right? It needs to get out of the way when like to get adoption because it's all well and good being licensed for these things, but if they're too complicated to wield, manage, or understand, they just won't ever get used, right? Because it's all bundled in together on a license anyway.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's where we come in, I guess, as consultants to help
Exactly. Yeah.
unmuddy the water.
Yeah. Exactly. Definitely. So we've talked about it quite a lot. So we might as well, actually a finally deep dive on PIM. Privileged identity management. Can you just go through PIM for me and just sort of explain at a high level what it's trying to achieve?
So, privileged identity management is the ability to be able to give um, restricted access to management groups and groups. And I'll talk about groups in a minute. So, this is just-in-time access. So, in effect, with the roles within Azure AD, so the global admins, global readers, security admin, etc. And within Azure, the owners, the contributors, etc. You're able to specify a user that role having X amount of time to use that role. So this is where you can assign the users as eligible, and they can activate that role. And that activation could be self approval, depending on the role. So maybe you've got a lower role like a reader or something that maybe don't want to be active all the time but you want them to be able to elevate into, they can just self-approve. And that could be all they have to do is require Azure MFA. Some of the other sort of configuration there is how long they can have it for. So maybe with like a global admin, you might say you can only have that for an hour at a time, maybe 2 hours. But global reader, you might be might have for an 8-hour day, because it's relatively safe. Whilst you can do reconnaissance, you can't change anything. So you set those pieces, and then for roles like global admin or owner, you can set an approval group or subset of users, so they have to approve that access. So you can put the request in, submit it, and then it goes to that team or that group of people. Um, Once they approve it, then it then activates, and then you get it for the set amount of time. So the question that a lot of people have about this is, well, if I've got an approval process for global admins, and I'm going to do a change out of hours, my manager's not going to be awake at 2 o'clock in the morning. How how am I going to get that approved when I can only do 2 hours? So the answer to that is that within your request, you can specify a custom time to activate. So you can say that at 2 a.m. I want global admin for 2 hours, and then the approver sees when you need it. And when you one thing I've kind of missed out is when you do your request for approval, you got to put a justification, and you can also add a box for a change number, an instant number, or a ticketing system number. So that if you're tracking it against change management, then at least it all ties up.
What,
But
somebody's
yes,
actually using change management, Alan?
yes, yes,
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
yes, I know. Um, so yes, so then the approver can potentially see the ticket, that why they're making that change and the justification, and then they can approve that role, and then it will activate at that time. So that's all really powerful, and we use it a lot. That's what Sam was saying about, we use it with our customers where we go into, we're B2B'd into a customer, and they give us a reader and contributor and owner, as or whatever we need, global, sometimes we have global admin, and then we go through that approval process, so they know that, one, we're working in that environment, but two, they're understanding what we're doing, so that there's no surprises.
Yeah, and I think that is, in our scenario, it's very powerful, from a risk mitigation from all sides, right? Because sometimes it is quite tempting to just give people, the roles that they will require just permanently. And I absolutely love the time boxing element of it. You might only be eligible for certain, to even request elevation for certain periods of time. If you're engaged with a customer for a month, they give you a month in PIM, and then it completely goes, and you can't then,
That is
you
true.
know,
We haven't talked about that. Yeah. So
yeah. Sorry,
when you're
sorry,
when you're
yeah,
assigning the roles, you can specify that it's only for a maximum of X time. So yeah, so we're working with a customer at the moment, and in effect, we do it monthly. That when it comes to the end of the month, we request access for the next amount of time we think we need it for, and then
yeah.
they approve it, they extend it.
Yeah, and then we get that natural review time of, like, say people from our team, our side now don't need access because maybe they've come in to do a specific package of work which is now completed, but others may still need access. So it's also good to carve out the dead wood from both sides,
Yeah,
and all that sort of stuff. It does require a little bit of administration, right? They've got to set up things their side, and maybe you'll go through that anyway, but it's definitely a huge benefit, from external parties, B2Being into an organization.
yeah, absolutely. And it's the settings for the amount of access, the amount of time someone has access, or whether they're able to have something for a permanent amount of time, is all based on the role itself. So it's not just a global setting that you set. It is per role within Azure and Azure AD. Um, so that's talking about that. And there was something else I was thinking about that I needed to talk to about, but I can't think what it was now. So I'll come back to it when I remember it. But let's talk about privileged access groups. Now they're currently in preview, and I think they've been in preview for a year now. It's been some time. And what it is that it gives you the ability to do just in time um, to that group. So you could be, maybe you're in that group for as a member for 2 hours or for 8 hours. Now this is quite good for maybe if you need quick access to a management system that isn't Azure AD roles or Azure, and it's a third party system. Maybe it's the password system to administer it, but you don't want to give someone permission all the time. They only need it for a small amount of time because obviously it's quite sensitive um, environment. Or maybe it's a role within a HR system. Yeah, maybe it's within Dynamics, as an example, from a Microsoft side, or a third party HR system. This gives you the ability to just in time become a member of that group, and then based on if that group is being synchronized with the third parties or with Dynamics, etc., then it will give you permission to that system for that amount of time. So it just opens up the flexibility you can do. So I think in the last episode we were talking about PIM and other clouds, and that Entra permission management has that sort of native connection. From a Azure AD PIM perspective, we would more than likely federate the AWS and GCP of the world to Azure AD as their identity, and then provision the users over from that. And the groups that we would use would be previous access groups, so that we can just in time access. Say we need access to this project in GCP as an example for 8 hours, or this role on that project. So then we get elevated into that group, that gets synchronized, and then we've got permission for the 8 hours. So that's kind of the way of make it more flexible with other applications out there.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Any other aspects of PIM or in that world that you want to cover? Have you remembered what you forgot?
No, I haven't. It's the most annoying thing, and I think it was quite good
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, I can't think of anything at the moment.
Okay,
Yeah,
well let's move on. Let's ask the age-old question of how's it licensed? What does it cost? Is this going to hurt?
yeah. So I can never remember the costings for it, but so this is based on the Azure AD Premium P2 license. So it's all part of that, and you are if you want to use some of the functionality, you don't necessarily have to license every user. It depends on what you're doing. So if you're using PIM and access reviews, so with PIM, you only need to license the users that are using that service. So it might only be your admins. So it may be a small subset of your users. Of course, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Episode no, it's not episode 6. Was it episode 6? Maybe. Yes, episode 6, season 2, where we talked about all the other features of all the benefits of having P2, like identity protection. But with access reviews, you only have to license the reviewers at that point as well. So that's not too bad. But obviously, access reviews, it's going to be any user potentially, using it. So you will have to license everyone for that in Azure at least. Yeah.
Okay, so these all sit under P2, and obviously P2 has got more in it than just these elements as well. That's correct, isn't it, Alan?
Yeah.
If you,
See, I
yeah,
think the main piece is identity protection.
yeah.
On top of this.
Okay, and there is potentially a way to ratchet licensing as you go through, right? You might decide that access reviews is the last thing that you want to do, or and then spreading that out to the rest of the organization. Whereas you might be able to get away with less licensing for say PIM and
Yeah.
and so on, right? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I don't really have anything else to ask you about these ones really. I mean, my big fan favorite is PIM, obviously, right? I'm a big advocate of that. Are there any other sort of aspects to identity governance that you want to talk about?
Yeah. So I've just remembered what I
Oh,
need to say
amazing!
about PIM.
Phew.
Yeah, I know it's like you said it. So because you're managing those roles with PIM, it means you get alerts when someone just adds themselves to those roles. So it's actually an auditing perspective or alerting. So say you've got global admin and you've enrolled it into PIM. Um, so if an admin or another global admin decides just to add a user to that role rather than via PIM, then there is an alert on it to say someone's been added as an active enrollment. So you can stop that. I guess it's kind of permission creep. You can stop people having dedicated access all the time if it's a corporate stance not to. I guess that also would alert you on maybe a bad actor elevating their rights to try and keep a foothold within the organization. The The other thing around auditing as well is that within the Azure AD logs, signing uh, the Azure AD logs, um, you see all of that interaction. You see who approved it. You see your justification. You see all that auditing information. So beforehand, you wouldn't have seen that. It's someone just giving you a permission, a role, and that's it. There's no like justification or anything, um, and that can be fed into Microsoft Sentinel or other seams, which then alerting could be created on if it was unusual.
Okay, great. Yeah, that sounds really good, and giving more context and more visibility of the changes in your environment is always a great thing, isn't it? That's always you know top of our agenda, right? Is understanding what's going on in your environment so that you can then control it. So yeah, amazing. Okay, let's leave it there then, unless you think of anything else, obviously, that comes to your mind in the next few minutes. But yeah, let's leave it there. We're really good on time as well for this one. We're only at 31 minutes, so that's I think that's nice, digestible for people, because usually we can ramble on and talk to each
Yes.
other for an hour, can't we? So yeah, always nice to keep it nice and sharp. Okay, so let's do a little bit of reflection, because we like to do these just for me, well, for the person asking the questions to then feed, mirror back to the other, just to make sure that we've understood. Actually, we've been listening. Basically, it's our homework and our tests. Okay, so identity governance. It assists in managing access and a user's access lifecycle. So we are we're it's really giving us a grasp on who has access to what and under what conditions they have access to those things. I know that's very like generic and wishy-washy and high level, but I think it when we're talking about access packages, that's what it's really trying to do, isn't it? It's trying to model your catalog of your resources, and managing users life cycle of access to those packages. So yeah, I think that's a big one for me. Access reviews gives you a I'll call it automated way, semi-automated, automated way of being able to ensure that the users that have access to um, that are part of your Azure AD um, actually still need the access that they've been given. So that review can be done internally with the quotes managers of those users. So we talked about guest users, their manager actually being their sort of sponsor that sort of maybe invited them into the organization. Um, Getting a review from those people, and if you don't want to also do that, you can also go to the actual users themselves and check in with them to see if they still need access. If they're a dormant account and they never get back to you, then you can kind of be a bit more confident in the fact that you can silently remove them, because you maybe don't have an internal sponsor for them. You've gone back to them to ask them if they still need permission. If they haven't even got back to you, then it's probably not high on their priority list, or they're not part of it anymore. And then PIM is obviously just-in-time access to roles or groups within. It's both sides, isn't it? PIM. It's Azure AD and also Azure as
Yeah.
well on both sides, because of the group nature of it. I think that's pretty much it. Oh, and then you obviously talked about at the last bit. You also talked about the way that PIM can help you to add context to your logs around changes to your environment. Why these changes were made to the permissions, and also alerting you for when people do direct assignments and things like that.
Yeah.
And getting more context there. Anything else that I've missed there, or anything else you want to cover or recap?
No, I think that covers it. Seems to be quite a. I say short. We're what, at 34 minutes now. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think the thing is, what we're talking about here is a subset of functionality, aren't we? Right. Some of our
yeah,
bigger topics are like, when we talked about Azure Active Directory, we had about 15 things to talk about, didn't we? Right. Whereas we've just zeroed in on three sort of parts of it. So
Yeah.
I think you've given us some really good insights there. So and there's only so much we can do with a podcast as well. Do you know what I mean? It's we don't have the ability to take people through this journey of actually configuring these things. So we have to be careful with how much technical detail we actually go into, because it could start to get a little bit harebrained and complex. Okay, cool. So next episode, I'm going to take the leap and do an episode on the Microsoft Purview governance portal. It used to be called Azure Purview, I believe, before
Yep.
previously, and it's a bit of a beast. And I was recently on a Train the Trainer event, effectively a an event that is delivered by was delivered by Microsoft CSAs here in the UK. I believe it was the first Train the Trainer event that they had actually run, and effectively they took a bunch of partners, myself included, through the process, a real hands-on deep dive into the Purview governance portal. I think I can talk about it all because all of the documentation that we went through was on one of the CSA's GitHub page, which is completely public, right? So what I'm going to effectively do is I can't take you through that because in detail, because the Train the Trainer event was over the course of a whole day, and there were hands-on labs and things like that. But what is great about the documentation that the process that we went through and the documentation that they've chunked it up nicely to talk about, and all of the sort of the key elements of the governance portal that they really want to show off and talk to you about. So I'm going to take you through basically what I learnt during that thing, because I am in no way a Purview expert, and Purview has changed, and we're also going to have to see the appetite of people, because we could start talking about the new Purview um, product family, because things have changed in that space, haven't they? They've bucketed a lot of things under the Purview name. So we'll also see if that's something that people want as well, because there is some functionality in Purview that isn't linked to the governance portal, which is more Office 365 side of things that we've got experience with. So yeah, if you've enjoyed this episode, please do consider subscribing if you'd like to listen to more of this sort of content in the future. We have many more topics that we'd like to cover, and your listens and support is what will continue to fuel the podcast going forward.
We also have the ability to give us feedback. Did you enjoy this episode? Disagree with our thoughts or anything that I said? Did I miss anything? I don't think I did. I mean, I almost did, but I think I covered everything. Um,
Yeah,
please use the form that's in the show notes to leave us some feedback, and it helps us determine the next episodes.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, any feedback that you've got, and especially if you want to criticize Alan, I've got no problem with you sending a message to our feedback form. That no, I'm only joking, Alan. You did a great job. You did a great job. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for listening. If you got to this part of the episode, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Yep. Thanks everyone for listening, and speak to you soon. Bye.